Hey everyone. This is the first part in a series I hope to make on the misrepresentation, misunderstanding, and outright lies spouted by feminists to justify laws, specifically targeting men that would otherwise be viewed as unconstitutional, unfair, and hateful. I should not even have to say this, but if I don't, I know I'll be forced to deal with straw man arguments in the comments. I do not support rape. I am strongly against those who commit violence, whether in a sexual nature or not. I've provided links and citations for everything discussed in this video. In some cases, the info that I found was really long. The link was really long because it was a Google Books link. In that case, I just put in the citation in terms of what you need to type into Google to get the right result. Okay, now let's get on with it. One of the most common figures cited by feminists in discussions about rape is the number of females who will be victims of rape in their lifetime. At first, it was said that 1 in 4 females would be raped at some point in their lives. That figure fell to 1.5 and then to 1.6. Depending on the feminist you talk to, you'll typically hear one of these three figures. Either 1 in 4, 1 in 5, or 1 in 6 females will be raped at some point in their lives by a man. That really is an incredibly high number. We all know that anecdotal evidence isn't really evidence, but when a so-called statistic shows such a different view of reality than the one the rest of us live every day, we can usually start assuming that something's wrong with the statistic. While many people have made cogent arguments against hateful articles such as Schrodinger's rapist, most people seem to grant the 1 in 4 or 1 in 6 or 1 in 5 number either because they don't really want to investigate it themselves, or because even if the number was that high, the behavior advocated in Schrodinger's rapist would still be irrational. I think if we grant this statistic to our opponents too often, it will become fact, even outside of radical feminist circles. I believe this is extremely damaging to society's view of men and will result in further legislation and rape shield laws, which will result in even more unfair trials and make false rape allegations even more damaging. First, let's examine where these statistics come from. These figures seem to come exclusively from the 1985 Ms. Magazine report by Mary Koss. Other cited works typically draw results from the original report. Mary Koss claims she was contacted out of the blue by Gloria Steinem, who wanted to do a national rape survey on college campuses. Gloria had apparently chosen Mary Koss to direct this survey. Koss and her team interviewed about 3,000 females, it was just a few, I think 3,100, all in college, who were randomly selected from universities across the United States. These female students were all asked a series of 10 questions, generally about sexual violation, followed by questions about the specific violation. Questions about whether there was alcohol involved and how they felt both at the time and after the event. Koss counted everyone who answered affirmatively to the following 3 questions as having been raped. The questions are, quote, have you had sexual intercourse when you didn't want to because a man gave you alcohol or drugs? Second question, have you had sexual intercourse when you didn't want to because a man threatened or used some degree of physical force, i.e. twisting your arm, holding you down to make you? 3. Have you had sexual acts, anal or oral intercourse, or penetration by objects other than the penis when you didn't want to because a man threatened or used some degree of physical force to make you? Out of all the women questioned, Koss concluded that 27.5% of females had been victims of rape. This 27.5% number was made up of 15.4% who had, by Koss's standards, been raped, with another 12.1% who had been victims of attempted rape. This is where the 1 in 4, 1 in 5, or 1 in 6 statistics come from. There are obvious flaws with this study, so let's look at a few of them. Let me preface this section by saying that when I speak of rape here, I'm talking about Mary Koss's definition of rape as described in the questions above. First, when feminists use these statistics, those who are apparently victims of attempted rape are also classified as rape victims. In other words, even if you weren't raped, but in Mary Koss's definition rape had been attempted, you are still a rape victim. If you were drinking and consented to the sex, but then later regretted it, you were also a rape victim. This was regardless of whether the man was drinking as well. Here's the kicker. Out of all the women who Koss cited as being raped, only 25% of those women agreed it was rape. Again, only 1/4 of supposed rape victims agreed that they were raped. Such a problem does not bother Koss at the time, though, and she continues to publish the article as is. Aside from the obvious problem of women being labeled as rape victims when they don't agree they had been raped, probably the biggest problem with this study lies in the question about whether the woman was drinking alcohol at the time. If you've been drinking, consent to sex, and then later regret it, that is considered rape. It doesn't matter if the male didn't use force, persuasion, threats, or anything else. If the woman was drinking and she regretted it afterwards, it's rape. In fact, 12 years after this survey was published, Blade magazine reporters who weren't convinced by the survey reached out to Koss for a statement. Koss told the Blade, which is a small independent award-winning newspaper in Ohio, that, quote, "At the time I viewed the question as legal. I now concede that it's ambiguous," end quote. Most honest people would assume that a quote like that would be followed with a concession that the entire study was faulty, but such a quote wasn't forthcoming. Even though, by Koss's own admission, once you remove the positive responses to the alcohol question, the number you're left with is 1 in 9. That's an error of significant magnitude. However, it's still a high number. Once you also take into account the fact that only 1/4 of those determined to have been raped, by Koss's estimation, agreed that it was in fact rape, it becomes even more dubious. People like Neil Gilbert, a professor at Berkeley School of Social Welfare, asks if the confusion between a college student's sex experience and whether or not it's considered rape was an adequate representation of female undergraduates, or even on society as a whole. Cathy Young, a journalist commenting on this issue, observes that, quote, "Women have sex after initial reluctance for a number of reasons. Fear of being beaten up by their dates is rarely reported as one of them." Several others have argued that Koss clearly had no right to judge females who said they weren't raped as being rape victims. Another interesting finding found by Koss herself is that 42% of those she counted as rape victims went on to have sex with their so-called attackers at a later date. Based on the bad science that was used in this oft-cited survey, we can safely disregard the entire study. Anyone who uses Koss's study as evidence for any rape statistics should be soundly rebutted as having faulty evidence. Since this is by far the most cited piece of evidence for many laws, articles, and arguments by feminists, we can completely disregard these arguments and articles. The fact that studies like these influence law is despicable and should be opposed at every opportunity. Until we start being objective, there's no way we'll be able to address real rape and real violence. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope to continue this series shortly.